Why do I have two t-shirts on? Well, that underneath t-shirt, I already have a clone. I made the black t-shirt from it. And now I want to make it into a v-neck t-shirt. So I've put my sample v-neck in over my existing clone t-shirt. And I'm going to do it the super easy way. Just sort of sort yourself out so everything's lying flat and straight. And now there's no measuring in this method. I'm just going to pin the important pieces. So I'm going to pin the V. That's very important. That's going to give me my depth. I'm going to make sure that my shoulders are at the same level that they sit on my body. And what I've noticed, and yes, I'm closing my eyes because apparently I work better with my eyes closed. I've noticed that my shoulder of my white one is a lot narrower than the blue t-shirt. So I'm just pinning that so that it sits exactly as it sits on the blue t-shirt, because that's the clone that I've already got. Now the other part that, yes, everything's right, the other part that I need to do is the back. The white t-shirt has a higher back than my scooped blue t-shirt, and that's all I need. Now I can go straight down to my pattern and put the adjustments in. So I've just traced around my clone pattern. That was the blue t-shirt. I've already made it up once, and into the black t-shirt. And I'm going to use the sleeves that I've already done. So I'm not worrying about that. We've already put all the work into that. I'll put a t-shirt clone video in the top right corner, so you can do that if you need. Now, I've just made the V-neck measurement marker. Now I'm going to the shoulders, because that's different, lying my blue t-shirt exactly on where it is, where the pattern is. I've noted that my white t-shirt is a little bit further in. Now I'm going to do the same thing to the back of the neckline. Line it up exactly, the blue t-shirt to the clone. And this is where the white t-shirt's going to be. We know it's going to be a bit taller because we've noticed that on body. So put that marker in and just sketch it across. Now we do know that that shoulder is also going to be a little bit wider because we've done that on the front. So let's just lengthen that shoulder out by the same length and then sketch in the back neckline. Now that all makes sense really, because a V-neck can't be too open, otherwise it's going to fall off your shoulders. Now we're going to do the V-neck line. So we're really just doing a straight line from point to point, from the shoulder point down to the middle of the neck V. And that's it. It's as simple as that. We do need to do some truing up. So I'm going to take a measurement of my shoulders because they're going to get sewn together, and make sure that I've actually put them in correctly. If there's any little changes, that's okay. You just sketch in the changed line. And then of course we'll cut it out. Truing up is a lot easier with the cut pieces, and of course label them. The centre back fold, when you made this, etc, etc. So now I'm just truing up the shoulders again. They're just slightly out, so I'll cut a little sliver off there, and now they're perfect. All right, that was my V-neck t-shirt. It's now complete. And I really like the fall of the body of this t-shirt, which is why I wanted to put the V-neck on it and combine the best of both worlds. We're going to cut the material, and there's a problem. Okay, now, this is for inset binding. You will have noticed that my V was done for the finished t-shirt, so for the finished application of the binding. But my pattern needs to take that off. We're not doing binding, stretch binding like the top corner there, which would go hard up against the cut edge. Instead, we need to take away a little bit the width of the binding, and then we add a seam allowance, because it has to have a seam allowance. In practice, this is what it looks like. This is my binding. It's folded. I've noted how much seam allowance I've given. And now I'm going to adjust my pattern. So that binding was actually cut to the length of, or the width of that ruler. So I'm taking a measurement there, and it's half of that because it will be folded. So I'm going to take off half of that because that's my folded binding. I don't have to take anything else. So that's what I'm doing. I'm not putting the seam allowance in, I'm just taking off that binding amount because I make my patterns with 0 seam allowance included. I always put them in because it makes them very, very flexible. So I'm just making sure that's a nice consistent line. And that is actually my new line for a very deep V-neck t-shirt with inset binding. Now, I cut mine out wrong, so I have to go and correct that on my cut pieces. It's going to affect the V-neck and it's going to affect the back of the neckline because that's where the binding goes. So I'm just trimming off that amount that I need. How wide you make your binding is completely up to you. So that's a bit arbitrary. Hopefully you don't make this mistake. Hopefully you get it right now that you've seen me make the mistake and you just get your pattern perfect. So let's assume your pattern's perfect and this is how you'll be cutting it out. You're going to put seam allowance in for the front, for the shoulder, for the armhole, for the side seam, and then you're going to put hem allowance, however deep you want your hem, at the bottom of the shirt. And of course you've got a center front fold. Okay, that's pretty easy. Front piece done. Go ahead and subscribe, do all that good stuff. Keep watching through. We will sew this all up. And this is the back part. Again, seam allowance at the top, at the shoulder, around the armhole, down the side seam, and hem allowance at the bottom. T-shirts are pretty easy actually, which is a good thing once you've got your pattern sorted out. Now I'm actually going to make 2 t-shirts, or 3 t-shirts. The white ones are done with the deep V. The black one you'll see is with the shallower V where I do my first version of the pattern. All right, the armhole again, seam allowance all the way around and then give yourself hem allowance. Remember, we've done these sleeves and we paid really particular attention to get them right. We do need a little notch at the front because we need to know which sleeve goes where. Let's talk about cutting out the binding. It is simply a very long rectangle. How long do you need it? Well, you can see in the top left, I am walking a measuring tape around my neckline to see how long I need it. But then you probably should add on 3 to 4 inches on either side because we need to have some playroom. And the coming video is going to be about how we do this binding and how we apply it in 2 different ways. But for now, you just want a super long piece of rectangular binding. This is going to be the width of my ruler, folded in half, and I'm just putting in seam allowance on either side. I'm just finishing that off now. Now you don't have to worry about the fishtaily bit at the end. That's done for one of the methods and I'm about to go through the pattern for that. I will show you how to sew that too very soon. There we go. You can do inset binding a few ways, but this is the one where it's from behind. Sewn from behind, so you've got that seam there. All right, I'm going to simulate this with my best pictorial skills. Okay, we'll pretend that t-shirt's there, the V-necked, and we've got that centered on that line. And I've got my 2 bits of rectangle pieces of binding and I've put them on, I've sticky taped them on. And what I've done is I've just made sure that they've got the seam allowance factored in. So that's a sew line there. Okay, so I have got seam allowance. And then that shows me where the V is going to happen. So make sure we've got the seam allowance in, and where that vertical piece happens is where the vertical line happens right there. That's where we're going to draw in our line for our little pattern. So we draw it on both pieces and it's folded, so I'm going to draw it on the underside bit as well. You won't have 2 pieces for this. This is just for visualization for you. Okay, you'll just have one piece. Now I sticky taped it on, so I'll take it off and unfold it. And this is what it should now be looking like. You should have this sort of forked look, fishtail if you like, snake tongue if you like. Okay, this forked look up through here to the fold line. And now I'm going to put in, just dot in a little bit of seam allowance, because that's where we're going to sew that on the solid line. So we do need some seam allowance. So just draw that in. Like I said, I did 2 pieces of rectangles there just so you could see. Your pattern will just be one long rectangle with this at the end and a fold at the other side. That is our little pattern for a sewn from behind V-neck inset binding. All right, let's have a look at what that might look like if we were to sew it. I'm going to simulate that with paper. So I've got my 2 bits back again, the ends of my 1 bit. Okay, and I'm going to put them right sides together, if this was material. And I'm going to do my best just with pins on paper to show you what the sewing will be. The full tutorial for how I do this method is coming in the next video. In fact, the next video is such a bumper episode. I've got 2 ways of sewing inset binding. So this is the simulation of what's going to happen. We'll sew up through there and then we undo it. Well, we turn it inside out sort of. Bit hard with paper. There we go. And as you can see, when we fold that fold back in, we've somehow miraculously got ourselves a V with the center bit stitched. And that is inset binding sewn from behind. Now, before we even get onto the binding, we have to sew the t-shirt up. So we're just going to do the shoulder seams to start with. And we've done it from the neckline out to the sleeve in that direction, because directional sewing does matter. I'm using an overlocker. If you're using a sewing machine for any of these seams, all you want to do is a very narrow little zigzag and your seaming will be great. Now, whether you're doing a overlocker or a sewing machine job, this is the side seam, by the way, from the underarm down to the hem. You've got 2 of them to do. But whichever machine you're using, you must put in stretch needles. Some people will say knits will have ballpoint or jersey needles. Yes, it's true, but I find that a stretch needle is going to be so much better. It solves a lot of problems. All right, so here's my second side seam being sewn up. Almost finished. And what do we have to do after we finish the side seams? You guessed it, we've got to go on to the sleeves. We can check how good our sewing is. Let's have a look if it lines up perfectly under the underarm. It does. All right, so the sleeves, we're just going to do this tiny little bit of sleeve seam. Now, if you've got long sleeves, it'll be a lot longer. You can, of course, make this a long sleeve. The V-neck's going to work on any top, summer or winter. Okay, you can make it long sleeve. I have put a video in for you earlier, but I'll put it in the description box if you want to make it long sleeved. All right, so there's our sleeve seams done, and this becomes the tricky part for me. I never know which way to put them in, so I'm locating my little notch. That's my front of the sleeve, and I have to find which way is the good side and which is the bad side of the fabric. And then I'm just going to pop them in the order that they're going to sit on my t-shirt. Okay, so I figured out that's the front, and there we go. That's my right, and the other one's the left. Okay, judged by the notches. Once I figure that out, they go into the round hole of the armhole. We line them up with the seams right there on the underarm, and we walk it around very, very, very carefully, making sure that those edges are perfectly in alignment. If one is a little bit higher than the other, you'll find that you'll get a little bit excess material. Now, there's no excess material because we paid such close attention when we did our draft, our clone, okay, of our pattern. So there, even if I just slightly don't walk it neatly, you get a gap. But this is sitting perfectly because I've walked it all the way around, making sure my edges are aligned. Once we've done that, then we get to have an easy job to sew them in. So again, if you're doing it by a sewing machine, you've got a little zigzag, a narrow zigzag happening. And if you're doing it by an overlocker, well, pretty easy. Just make sure your material's lying straight. That's why I'm sort of moving it around all the time. And also make sure that you are getting the shoulder seam. That will be coming up soon, I think. Yes, here it comes. Get the shoulder seam in so that that seam lies flat. You don't want it to be twisted between the neckline and the shoulder seam. All right, that's lying flat. Keep on going. It's pretty easy. I'm going to skip ahead. Line up your train tracks or your stitch line so that you're going to meet it where you started from. And of course you can chain off and finish seams with a loop turner or a zigzag so they don't unravel. That's all looking pretty good. So your test for an inset sleeve is that you want it to be lying smooth, perfect, no puckers, no wrinkles, no stretching, no forcing it in there. Okay, and if your pattern's good, it will just happen beautifully like this. You can see it's just sitting perfectly across the shoulder and all the way around the arm. So that's a nice job. And it should be easy. Okay, it should be easy. All right, we've got the hems to do. Now I've just pressed those up because I am going to be doing the bottom of the shirt and the sleeves, the hems, with stretch twin needles. Okay, and again, there's a video going to appear on the top left if you want to go and do that adventure of how to figure out your twin needle, stretch twin needle hemming for knits. I predicted when I did that, I did it first of all on very, very, very fluid and stretchy fabric, and I did get it as good as I could. I predicted it would be better when I used a crisper knit material, and I'm really pleased with how this is turning out. It's also a lot easier with white material because I can actually see where that hem is turned up and match my left needle so that I'm going right smack against the edge of that hem. Let's have a look at how this is going to turn out in just a minute, but I am getting pretty good at my twin hemming. Okay, so you can see here that both of the sleeves are the same width, and this is the quality of the stitch. There's no sticking up bit between the middle of the two stitches, which is great. It's lying flat, and look how close I got that to the edge of the hem turn up. Okay, it's right there, right on the edge, looking really, really, really beautiful. I'm very pleased with my twin stretch hemming progress. Okay, and I had similar results on the hem. So join us next week. We're actually, I'm going to do a bumper episode. I'm going to be doing 2 t-shirts because we're going to get to this binding stuff, all right? The inset binding. I'm going to do it 2 ways. 2 ways, okay? And we're going to get some inset binding for a V-neck happening without the dreadful puckers and pleats and all that rubbish that can happen. So enjoy your comfy life, and I'll see you next time.